Hi Guy, tonight we descend into a hidden tomb beneath ancient pines, where moonlight paints the scene with an eerie glow. You trudge through damp earth, the air thick with the scent of pine needles and something older, something unsettling. You probably won't survive this. Kidding. Unless? So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And don't forget to let me know where you are in the world right now. Local time too, it's always fun to know. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself at the entrance of a warrior's tomb, hidden deep within a forest. The air is heavy, with the scent of damp earth and pine. A full moon casts long, dancing shadows, making the gnarled branches of the ancient pines seem like skeletal fingers reaching down towards you. The silence is deep, broken only by the rustling of unseen creatures in the undergrowth. This is a place where the veil between worlds feels thin, where whispers of the past seem to linger in the air. A single flickering lantern illuminates the entrance, its weak light barely pushing back the oppressive darkness. It hangs from a rusty hook, swaying gently in the breeze, revealing worn stone steps leading down into the unknown. They're slick with moss and damp with the breath of the earth. You descend, each step echoing with a hollow thud that seems to reverberate through the very bones of the earth. The air grows colder with each descending step, and the smell of damp earth intensifies, mingling with the sweet, almost cloying scent of decay. It's a chilling reminder of the countless generations that have passed, leaving only echoes behind. Historical fact: burial mounds, or kofun, were common in ancient Japan, especially during the Kofun period, though this story takes place much later. Imagine the sheer scale of some of these mounds, Guy. Some as big as small mountains. It makes you wonder what secrets they still hold. You reach the bottom of the steps, the lantern light barely piercing the gloom. The air grows colder still, heavy with the weight of centuries. You can almost taste the dust of ages on your tongue. A sense of anticipation, tinged with fear, grips you. You're not just exploring a tomb, you're stepping into a forgotten story. Quirky tidbit: some samurai believed that burying a warrior's favorite weapon with them would appease their restless spirit. Imagine stumbling upon a tomb filled with katanas. Guy, talk about a collector's dream or nightmare, depending on how restless those spirits actually are. A large stone chamber opens before you, the walls covered in intricate carvings. Scenes of battles, mythical creatures, and ancient rituals intertwine, telling a story lost to time. Moonlight filters through cracks in the ceiling, illuminating a central scene. Two figures, cloaked and shadowed, stand before a stone table. Their faces are obscured, but the tension radiating from their still forms is palpable. They seem frozen in a moment of immense importance. What pact were they making? What secrets were they sharing? Scholarly debate. Historians still argue whether this specific treaty, the one depicted on these very walls, was signed in a tomb like this one, or a more traditional setting. Imagine the drama, Guy. Signing a treaty in a tomb. Talk about setting the mood. A sense of unease prickles your skin. This isn't just a tomb. It's a stage for something significant. The air crackles with an unseen energy, a sense of anticipation hanging heavy in the silence. Something happened here, something powerful, and the echoes of that event still resonate within these stone walls. You can feel it in the chill that settles deep in your bones, in the whisper of the wind that seems to carry voices from the past. You know, it's funny how tombs were basically prime real estate back in ancient Japan. I mean, who needs a beachfront property when you can have an eternal resting place with intricate carvings and, ghosts? Talk about a buyer's market. Okay, bad joke. But seriously, the craftsmanship here is incredible. Just look at the detail in these carvings. But what happened to those two figures frozen in time? What secrets does this tomb hold? And more importantly, what awaits us deeper within? The two figures remained motionless, locked in a silent tableau. One, you realized, was a powerful daimyo, Lord Akiyama, recognizable by the intricate crane and rising sun motif emblazoned on his dark lacquer armor, and the stern, unwavering expression etched onto his face. He radiated an aura of authority, a silent pressure that seemed to bend the very air around him. The other figure was smaller, slighter, their face completely obscured by a deep hood that cast their features into shadow. The silence between them was thick, heavy with unspoken words, and the weight of whatever transaction was unfolding. You noticed a third person, huddled in the corner of the tomb, almost swallowed by the dancing shadows cast by the flickering oil lamps. It took a moment for your eyes to adjust to penetrate the gloom, but when they did, you recognized him instantly. It was Taro, the pot scrubber from the daimyo's kitchen. A man known more for his clumsiness and the burnt rice perpetually clinging to the bottom of his cooking pots than for any kind of courage or cunning. His presence here, in this cold, solemn space, was as jarring as a splash of bright paint on a monochrome canvas. The social hierarchy in samurai-era Japan was extremely rigid, a ladder with countless rungs and a vast chasm separating the powerful elite from those who served them. Men like Taro occupied the lowest rungs, invisible, unheard, their lives spent in the drudgery of the kitchens, a world away from the grandeur and intrigue of the daimyo's court. What could he possibly be doing here? This was no place for kitchen help. Taro held a small, unassuming clay pot, its contents glowing faintly, a subtle luminescence that pulsed with a life of its own. The light seemed to emanate from within the liquid it held, casting an ethereal glow on Taro's anxious face. He clutched the pot as if it were a precious jewel, his knuckles white against the rough clay. What was he doing here? His presence was a puzzle, a piece that didn't fit into the scene. You strained to hear what was being said between the daimyo and the hooded figure, leaning forward until your ear brushed against the cold stone wall. They spoke in hushed tones, their voices little more than whispers that seemed to evaporate into the echoing expanse of the tomb. Their words were snatched away by the currents of air, lost to the echoes of the tomb, leaving you frustratingly in the dark. You knew that samurai often used coded language, especially when discussing sensitive matters, like treaties or alliances. Every word, every inflection, could carry a hidden meaning, a secret message woven into the fabric of their conversation. Suddenly, Taro moved, shifting his weight nervously. In doing so, he tilted the clay pot, and a single drop of the glowing liquid escaped the rim, splashing onto the cold stone floor. The air, previously heavy with the musty scent of incense and age, was suddenly infused with a powerful, complex aroma. You recognized the sharp, floral scent of lavender, but interwoven with it was something darker, more sinister, the bitter, intoxicating scent of nightshade. It was a sleeping draught, potent and swift-acting. Your mind raced, trying to make sense of what you were witnessing. Taro wasn't just a pot scrubber, he was the daimyo's secret something. Spy? Assassin? Alchemist? The possibilities spiraled in your mind. The realization hit you like a lightning bolt. This wasn't just a treaty signing. It was a carefully orchestrated play. The hushed tones, the hooded figure, Taro's presence, the sleeping draft, it all pointed to a deception, a plot unfolding beneath the surface of what appeared to be a simple meeting. Lord Akiyama wasn't negotiating, he was manipulating. A wry thought flickered through your mind, a darkly humorous observation in the face of the unfolding intrigue. You'd heard whispers amongst the kitchen staff about Taro's cooking, about dishes so bland they could drain the color from the sky, about rice so burnt it could be used to pave roads. Perhaps, you mused, his culinary ineptitude wasn't a failing at all, but a carefully cultivated skill, a way to create concoctions that could subdue even the most powerful of men. Maybe his cooking wasn't bad, it was just weaponized. The historical record, fragmented and often contradictory, offered little in the way of definitive answers. Historians still argue about Taro's true role in these events, with some suggesting he was a highly trained spy, infiltrating the daimyo's household under the guise of a simple pot scrubber. Others believed he was a skilled assassin, his culinary creations a convenient cover for his deadly potions. And then there were those, a small but vocal minority, who maintained that Taro was, in fact, just a really bad pot scrubber who happened to stumble into a pivotal moment in history, a pawn in a game he didn't understand. The truth, like the whispers in the tomb, remained elusive, lost to the echoes of time. The daimyo and the hooded figure stepped forward, their hands reaching for the scroll lying on the rough-hewn stone table. It was the treaty, the culmination of months of tense negotiations, the document that held the fragile promise of peace, the potential to end years of brutal, bloody conflict. The air thrummed with a strange tension, a mixture of hope and apprehension hanging heavier than the humid night air. The clearing, nestled deep within the whispering bamboo forest, had been chosen for its seclusion, a secret sanctuary away from the prying eyes of court officials and curious onlookers. History was littered with such clandestine meetings, treaties signed under the cloak of darkness, whispered agreements brokered in hidden alcoves, each one a testament to the delicate dance of diplomacy. Moonlight, filtering through the rustling bamboo leaves, bathed the scroll in an ethereal glow. Intricate calligraphy, a testament to the skill of the court scribes, flowed across the parchment, each stroke a careful articulation of complex clauses and concessions. The official seals of the two warring clans, the crimson sun of the Akita and the silver crescent moon of the Minamoto, stood starkly against the aged parchment, symbols of a rivalry that had stretched across generations. The silence was broken only by the chirping of crickets and the soft whisper of the wind through the bamboo stalks. The daimyo, Lord Akita, reached for the ceremonial brush, its sable hairs tipped with fresh ink. He paused, his hand hovering over the designated space for his signature, a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. Just as he was about to commit his clan to the uncertain path of peace, a tiny plop echoed in the sudden stillness. Another drop of liquid, dark as midnight, splashed onto the treaty itself, spreading rapidly across the parchment. The source? Young Taro, the daimyo's clumsy but well-meaning cupbearer, swaying precariously on his feet, the remnants of the sleeping draft clearly still affecting him. The ink blurred, the carefully crafted characters smearing into an indecipherable mess. You gasped, your hand flying to your mouth to stifle the sound. Surely this was a disaster. Years of careful negotiation, months of tense parley, all ruined by a single drop of spilled tea, but, strangely, no one else seemed to react. Lord Akita remained frozen, his hand still hovering above the ruined document. The hooded figure, their face obscured by the deep shadows of their cowl, didn't even flinch. Was Taro sabotaging the treaty? Had someone coerced the young cupbearer into this act of apparent clumsiness? Or was this somehow part of the plan? A wave of unease washed over you. Something didn't feel right. You couldn't help but think, Riley, that calligraphy was difficult enough without the added challenge of accidental sleeping drafts. Even the most skilled calligrapher would struggle to maintain a steady hand under these circumstances, let alone a drowsy cupbearer tasked with handling potent herbal concoctions. The moonlight seemed to intensify, casting long, distorted shadows across the clearing. There was an almost mystical quality to the scene, an otherworldly atmosphere that prickled your skin. You remembered hearing whispers from the older servants, tales of ancient samurai beliefs. Some believed that signing a treaty under the moonlight imbued it with added spiritual significance, a celestial seal of approval that transcended the mundane world of political maneuvering. Was this the reason for this strange, secretive meeting? The hooded figure, still silent, reached for the brush, their gloved hand surprisingly steady. With a slow, deliberate stroke, they signed their name onto the damaged document, the blurred characters seeming to take on a ghostly, almost luminous form in the moonlight. The ink, now a shimmering silver in the ethereal glow, spread and shifted, the damaged characters morphing into new, indecipherable symbols. Lord Akita watched, his expression unreadable, before finally taking the brush and adding his own signature, his hand now remarkably steady. The treaty, stained and blurred, was complete. The scene felt surreal, almost dreamlike. You knew, instinctively, that this event, this strange moonlit signing, would become a legend, whispered in hushed tones for generations to come. Historians, you imagined, would pore over fragmented accounts, debating the exact wording of the treaty, arguing over its true meaning, forever puzzled by the damaged original document, its secrets locked within the blurred ink and the silent testimony of the moon. The flickering gaslight cast long, dancing shadows across the cobbled street, mimicking the unease churning in Elias's gut. He'd followed the cryptic note to this deserted alleyway, the stench of stale beer and rotting refuse thick in the air. The message, tucked into his coat pocket earlier that day, had simply read, "Midnight. East Docks. Truth awaits." Truth about what? About his father's disappearance? About the whispers that had plagued him since childhood. Whispers of a hidden legacy he couldn't comprehend. He clutched the worn, leather-bound journal in his hand, its pages filled with his father's meticulous research, the last entry abruptly ending mid-sentence. This clandestine meeting, shrouded in secrecy, felt like the first real lead he'd had in months. A figure emerged from the shadows, their face obscured by a wide-brimmed hat. Elias tensed, his hand instinctively moving towards the small knife tucked into his boot. "You Elias Thorne?" the figure rasped, their voice low and gravelly. Elias hesitated, then nodded slowly. The figure stepped closer, the gaslight catching the glint of a silver ring on their gloved hand. The symbol etched into the ring sent a shiver down Elias's spine. It was the same symbol he'd found sketched in the margins of his father's journal, a symbol he'd dismissed as a doodle until now. "You have something that belongs to me," the figure continued, their voice laced with a chilling calmness. "Your father, he took it." Elias's heart pounded in his chest. His father, a respected historian, a man of integrity, a thief? The accusation felt absurd, yet the evidence, however circumstantial, was mounting against him. He gripped the journal tighter, the leather creaking under the pressure. "I don't know what you're talking about," he replied, his voice barely a whisper. The figure chuckled, a dry, brittle sound. "Oh, I think you do." "The Obsidian Codex. It's time for it to be returned." The words hit Elias like a physical blow. The Obsidian Codex. He'd seen fleeting references to it in his father's notes, cryptic passages hinting at its power, its potential for both great good and unimaginable destruction. His father had dismissed it as a myth, a legend whispered among scholars, yet he'd clearly been searching for it. Had he actually found it? And if so, where was it now? "I've never heard of it," Elias lied, his voice trembling slightly. The figure took another step closer, their face now illuminated by the flickering gaslight. Elias gasped. It was a woman, her face etched with lines of weariness and worry, her eyes burning with an intensity that made him flinch. She was no older than 30, yet she carried herself with the weight of someone who had seen too much, experienced too much. "Don't play games, Elias," she said, her voice softening slightly. "Your father was a good man, a brilliant man, but he made a mistake. He underestimated the power of the Codex. He underestimated the lengths people would go to possess it." She paused, her gaze searching his face. "The Order wants it back, and they're not known for their patience." The Order. The name sent another shiver down Elias's spine. He'd heard whispers of them, a secretive organization rumored to control the city's underworld, their influence stretching far beyond the dimly lit alleys and shadowed docks. Were they the ones who had sent the cryptic note? Were they the ones responsible for his father's disappearance? "What do you want from me?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The woman sighed, running a hand through her dark hair. "I want to help you, Elias. Your father was my friend. He helped me escape the Order. He saved my life." Her voice cracked slightly, and for a moment Elias saw a flicker of vulnerability in her hardened gaze. "But the Codex, it's too dangerous. It needs to be destroyed." Elias hesitated, his mind racing. He still didn't understand the full extent of the Codex's power, but he could feel the weight of its significance pressing down on him. He thought of his father, of the unanswered questions, the lingering doubts that gnawed at his soul. Could the Codex hold the key to unraveling the mystery surrounding his disappearance? Could it provide the answers he so desperately craved? "I don't know where it is," he said, choosing his words carefully. "But I'll help you find it. I'll help you destroy it." The woman studied him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. "Be careful who you trust, Elias," she finally said, her voice low and urgent. "The Order has eyes and ears everywhere. They'll stop at nothing to retrieve the Codex." She reached into her coat and pulled out a small, intricately carved wooden box. "This belonged to your father," she said, handing it to him. "It might help you understand what he was involved in. But be warned, Elias, the truth can be a dangerous thing." Elias took the box, his fingers tracing the intricate carvings. He felt a strange energy emanating from it, a subtle hum that resonated deep within his bones. He looked up, but the woman had vanished, melting back into the shadows as quickly as she had appeared. He was alone once more, the flickering gaslight casting long, dancing shadows that seemed to mock his confusion and fear. He clutched the box tightly, the weight of his father's legacy and the dangerous secrets it held settling heavily upon his shoulders. He knew, with a chilling certainty, that his life had irrevocably changed. The shadows of doubt had solidified into a tangible threat, and he was now caught in a web of intrigue, far more complex and dangerous than he could have ever imagined. He had to find the Codex, not just for his father, but for himself. He had to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. The shimmering heat rising off the blasted plains made the horizon dance. The acrid smell of burnt metal and ozone still clung to the air, a grim reminder of the battle that had raged here just days before. Victory, a word that tasted like ash in Commander Alara's mouth. The cost had been staggering. Too staggering. She looked out at the ragged remnants of her battalion, their faces etched with exhaustion and loss. More ghosts than soldiers. They had won, yes, but what had they truly gained? This desolate wasteland? The silence of their fallen comrades? This peace? Alara ran a hand through her short, cropped hair, the gesture weary and automatic. The peace treaty was being signed tomorrow, in the neutral city of Viridia. A grand affair, she imagined, full of pompous pronouncements and hollow promises. The dignitaries would congratulate themselves, oblivious to the true cost, the sacrifices made by those who would not be there to witness their self-congratulatory spectacle. They wouldn't see the empty stares of the survivors, the lingering tremors in their hands, or the nightmares that haunted their sleep. They wouldn't hear the whispers of the dead on the wind. "Commander," a voice broke through her thoughts. Lieutenant Jax approached, his young face drawn and pale. He'd seen too much for someone his age. They all had. "The transport is ready. We depart for Viridia at dawn." Alara nodded, unable to meet his gaze. Viridia, the city of peace. Ironic, she thought bitterly, that it would be the setting for the formalization of a peace bought with so much blood. The journey to Viridia was a somber affair. The usual boisterous camaraderie of the battalion was absent, replaced by a heavy silence broken only by the rumble of the transport. Each soldier was lost in their own private world of grief and remembrance. Alara watched them, her heart aching for their pain, a pain she shared. She knew that the scars of this war, both visible and invisible, would linger long after the treaties were signed and the diplomats had returned to their comfortable lives. The opulent grandeur of Viridia was a stark contrast to the ravaged landscape they had left behind. Gleaming towers of polished marble and glass reached towards the sky, untouched by the ravages of war. The streets bustled with activity, merchants hawking their wares, children playing, citizens going about their daily lives, seemingly unaware of the sacrifices that had been made to preserve their peace. Alara felt a surge of resentment, a bitter taste in her mouth. Did they even know? Did they even care? The signing ceremony was held in the Grand Hall of the Citadel, a cavernous space adorned with intricate mosaics and towering statues. The air was thick with the scent of incense and the hushed whispers of dignitaries from across the galaxy. Alara stood with her remaining officers, a small, silent contingent in the midst of the opulent crowd. She watched as the representatives of the warring factions approached the table, their faces carefully neutral, their movements practiced and precise. The treaty was a thick document, bound in rich leather, its pages filled with elegant script and elaborate seals. As the leaders signed their names, a wave of nausea washed over Alara. This was it, the end. But for whom? For the fallen? For the survivors who would carry the weight of this war for the rest of their lives? Or for the politicians who would claim credit for the peace they had not earned? The ceremony concluded with a flurry of handshakes and polite pronouncements. The dignitaries congratulated each other, their voices ringing with false sincerity. Champagne flowed freely, the crystal glasses clinking a cheerful counterpoint to the silent screams echoing in Alara's mind. She turned away, unable to stomach the charade any longer. Outside, the city lights twinkled, a dazzling display of prosperity and peace. Alara found a quiet corner overlooking the cityscape, the cool night air, a welcome balm against the suffocating atmosphere of the citadel. Jax joined her, his expression mirroring her own disillusionment. "It doesn't feel real, does it?" he murmured, his voice barely a whisper. Alara shook her head. "No, it feels hollow." The peace had been bought at a terrible price. A price that the dignitaries in their gilded halls could never truly comprehend. A price paid in blood, in sacrifice, in the shattered lives of her soldiers. The treaty might mark the end of the war, but the true cost of peace would continue to be paid long after the ink had dried and the celebrations had faded. It was a debt that could never truly be repaid, a burden that they, the survivors, would carry forever. The silence of the fallen hung heavy in the air, a constant reminder of the price of peace. And Alara knew with a chilling certainty that the true war had just begun. The war within themselves. The war against the ghosts that would forever haunt their dreams. Rain lashed against the grimy windows of the abandoned warehouse, mirroring the tempest brewing inside Ilara. She gripped the hilt of the ceremonial dagger, its cold metal, a stark contrast to the burning anger that coursed through her veins. The betrayal was still raw, a gaping wound in her trust. Master Alaric, the man who had trained her, the man she had respected above all others, had used her, manipulated her into stealing the Sunstone for his own twisted purposes. The memories of his chilling confession echoed in her mind, each word a poisoned barb. The flickering gaslight cast long, dancing shadows that seemed to mock her turmoil. She had to find him. She had to confront him. Not for revenge, not anymore. The burning desire for retribution had cooled, leaving behind a steely resolve. She needed answers. She needed to understand how the man she had idolized for so long could have become the architect of her misery. A scraping sound from the shadows startled her. Her hand instinctively tightened around the dagger, her senses on high alert. A figure emerged, shrouded in the dim light. It was Theron, his face etched with worry. He held up his hands in a gesture of peace. "Ilara, I've been looking for you everywhere." Relief washed over her, momentarily softening the hard lines of her face. "Theron, what are you doing here? It's not safe." He stepped closer, ignoring her warning. "It's not safe for you to be alone right now, especially after what happened." Ilara turned away, unable to meet his gaze. The shame of her naivete was a heavy burden. "I need to find Alaric." "I know," Theron said softly. "And I'm going with you?" She shook her head. "This is my fight, Theron." "He betrayed me, not you." "He betrayed us both, Ilara." "He used the Order, everything we believed in, for his own gain." Theron's voice was laced with a quiet fury that resonated with her own. "Besides," he added, a hint of his usual playful demeanor returning, "who's going to stop you from doing something reckless?" Ilara managed a weak smile. He had a point. She knew she wouldn't be able to stop him from following her, and if she was honest with herself, she didn't want to. She needed his support, his unwavering belief in her. Now more than ever. "Fine," she conceded. "But we do this my way." Theron nodded, his expression serious. "Agreed. So, where do we start?" Ilara unfurled the crumpled piece of parchment she had found clutched in Alaric's abandoned chambers. It was a map, crudely drawn, but the landmarks were unmistakable. It depicted a hidden passage beneath the city, leading to a place marked simply as the Sanctuary. "He's gone underground," she said, tracing the lines of the map with her finger, "to a place I've never heard of." The journey through the city's underbelly was a harrowing experience. The air was thick with the smell of mildew and decay, and the oppressive silence was broken only by the drip, drip, drip of water echoing through the labyrinthine tunnels. Ilara led the way, the faint light of her lantern casting eerie shadows that danced on the damp stone walls. Theron stayed close behind her, his hand resting on the hilt of his sword. The tension between them was palpable, a silent acknowledgement of the danger that lurked in the darkness. They followed the map for what felt like an eternity, each turn bringing them deeper into the heart of the forgotten city. Finally, they reached a dead end. A solid stone wall blocked their path, seemingly impassable. Ilara examined the wall closely, running her fingers over its cold surface, searching for any sign of a hidden entrance. "There's nothing here," Theron said, his voice tinged with frustration. "We've hit a dead end." Ilara ignored him, her focus unwavering. The map indicated that the entrance to the sanctuary was hidden behind this wall. There had to be a way in. She noticed a small, almost imperceptible indentation in the stone, shaped like a crescent moon. It was barely visible, cleverly concealed amongst the other markings on the wall. She pressed her fingers against it, applying a steady pressure. A low rumbling sound filled the air, and a section of the wall began to slide open, revealing a dark, narrow passage beyond. Ilara exchanged a look with Theron, a mixture of relief and apprehension in her eyes. The sanctuary awaited. The passage opened into a vast cavern, dimly lit by flickering torches. The air was heavy with the scent of incense, and something else, something metallic, almost like blood. In the center of the cavern stood a stone altar, bathed in an unnatural glow. And there, standing before the altar, was Alaric. He turned as they entered, his face illuminated by the strange light. He looked older, wearier than Alara remembered. But his eyes, those piercing blue eyes, held the same chilling intensity. He held a gleaming blade in his hand, its edge pulsing with a malevolent energy. It was unlike anything Alara had ever seen. "Alara," he said, his voice echoing through the cavern. "You found me." She stepped forward, her hand gripping the hilt of her dagger. "Why, Alaric? Why did you do it?" He smiled, a cruel, twisted smile that sent a shiver down her spine. "Power, Alara. Power is the only thing that matters in this world." He raised the blade, its light reflecting in his eyes. "And with this, the blade of shadows, I will have all the power I desire." Alara felt a surge of fear, but she stood her ground. "You won't get away with this, Alaric. The Order will stop you." Alaric laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "The Order? They are blind, Alara. Blind to the true potential that lies within the shadows. They cling to their outdated beliefs, while I embrace the power that will reshape this world." "You're delusional," Theron said, stepping forward to stand beside Alara. "You've lost your way, Alaric. Let us help you." Alaric's gaze shifted to Theron, his eyes narrowing. "You? Help me? You are nothing but a pawn, just like her." He lunged forward, the blade of shadows flashing through the air. The flickering gas lamp cast long, dancing shadows across the cobbled alleyway. Rain slicked the stones, reflecting the dim light in a fractured mosaic. A chill wind whistled through the narrow passage, tugging at Elias's cloak. He clutched the small, velvet pouch tighter, its contents a heavy weight in his hand. He trusted Marius. He trusted him with his life, with the fate of the rebellion. And now he glanced over his shoulder, the shadows seeming to deepen, to shift and writhe with unseen eyes. He'd received the message just hours ago, a cryptic note slipped beneath his door. Midnight. Weaver's Alley. Come alone. It had Marius's mark, the stylized raven's feather etched in the corner. There was no mistaking it. But why the secrecy? Why this clandestine meeting place? A knot of unease tightened in his gut. Footsteps echoed from the alley's mouth. Elias tensed, his hand instinctively moving towards the hidden dagger beneath his cloak. A figure emerged from the darkness, the lamplight catching the gleam of wet leather and polished steel. It was Marius, but something was different. His usual jovial demeanor was gone, replaced by a grim set to his jaw, and a coldness in his eyes that Elias had never seen before. "Marius," Elias breathed, relief warring with suspicion. "What's going on? Why this meeting?" Marius didn't answer immediately. He glanced around the alley, his gaze lingering on the shadows as if searching for unseen listeners. Then his eyes locked with Elias's, and the coldness intensified. "There's been a complication," Marius finally said, his voice low and strained. "The council knows." Elias felt a jolt of icy fear. "They know about the uprising? How?" "It doesn't matter how," Marius snapped, his voice edged with impatience. "What matters is they know. They know everything. Names, dates, locations. They're rounding up everyone involved." Elias's mind reeled. Years of planning, of careful maneuvering, all unraveling in a single, devastating moment. He thought of the others, his friends, his comrades, all facing imprisonment, or worse. "We have to warn them," he said, his voice urgent. "We have to get them out of the city." Marius let out a harsh laugh. "Warn them? It's too late for that, Elias. The council has already moved. They've sealed the gates. No one gets in or out." "Then we fight," Elias said, his hand tightening on the dagger hilt. "We fight for our freedom." Marius shook his head slowly, a strange, almost pitying look in his eyes. "You still don't understand, do you? It's over, Elias. The rebellion is finished." The velvet pouch felt like a lead weight in Elias's hand. Inside, nestled amongst layers of protective cloth, lay the king's seal, the symbol of their authority, the key to their victory. He had risked everything to steal it, believing it would be their salvation. Now, it seemed like a cruel mockery. "There's still a way," Marius continued, his voice soft, almost persuasive. "A way to save yourself. Give me the seal." Elias stared at him, disbelief hardening into a cold certainty. You betrayed us." The words were a whisper, choked with anguish. A flicker of something. Guilt? Remorse? Crossed Marius's face, but it was quickly gone, replaced by a mask of cold resolve. "I did what I had to do," he said, his voice devoid of emotion. "The council made me an offer I couldn't refuse. They promised me immunity, a position of power, a new life." "And what about the rest of us?" Elias asked, his voice raw with pain. "What about the people we swore to protect? The ones who trusted us with their lives?" Marius shrugged. "They're casualties of war, Elias. Necessary sacrifices." He extended a hand. "Give me the seal. It's your only chance." Elias looked down at the pouch in his hand, the weight of it pressing down on him like a physical burden. He thought of his friends, their faces etched with hope and determination. He thought of the sacrifices they had already made, the risks they had taken, and he knew he couldn't betray them. Not even to save himself. He closed his hand tighter around the pouch, the velvet rough against his skin. He met Marius's gaze, his own eyes burning with a mixture of anger and sorrow. "I'd rather die a free man," Elias said, his voice low and steady, "than live as a traitor like you." He lunged, the dagger flashing in the dim light. The fight was short and brutal. The slick cobblestones offered little purchase, and the rain made the alley a treacherous battleground. Elias fought with the desperation of a cornered animal, fueled by betrayal and grief. But Marius, trained by the council's elite guard, was a formidable opponent. He parried Elias's blows with ease, his movements precise and deadly. In the end, it was Marius's experience that prevailed. He disarmed Elias with a swift kick, sending the dagger skittering across the cobblestones. He pinned Elias against the wall, his forearm pressing against his throat, cutting off his air. "Foolish," Marius gasped, his face contorted with exertion. "You could have lived." Elias struggled against him, his lungs burning, but it was no use. He knew this was the end. He closed his eyes, a single, bitter thought echoing in his mind. Betrayed. The flickering firelight danced across Elara's face, highlighting the worry etched there. Her hand rested on the hilt of her sword, the familiar weight a small comfort in the face of the daunting decision ahead. "This is it, then," she murmured, her voice barely audible above the crackling flames. "The crossroads. The warrior's choice." Cale, seated opposite her, nodded grimly. His usually jovial face was set in a mask of contemplation. The fire reflected in his eyes, making them seem like burning embers. He picked up a small, smooth stone and idly turned it over in his hand. "The prophecy is clear. One path leads to victory, albeit a Pyrrhic one. The other, oblivion." Elara's fingers tightened around the hilt of her sword. The prophecy, whispered through generations of her people, foretold a time of great upheaval, a time when a warrior would be faced with an impossible choice, a choice that would determine the fate of their world. That warrior, it seemed, was her. "Pyrrhic victory," she echoed, the words tasting like ash in her mouth. "What kind of victory is that?" Cale sighed, the sound heavy with the weight of responsibility he too carried. "A victory bought with blood. A victory that leaves the land scarred and broken, the people decimated, but a victory nonetheless. The darkness will be banished. The Shadow Lord defeated." Silence descended upon them, thick and suffocating. Elara stared into the flames, seeing not the dancing firelight but visions of battle, of loss of a ravaged land. Was that truly the best she could hope for? A victory achieved at such a terrible cost? The second path, the one Cale hadn't elaborated on, loomed in her mind like a specter. Oblivion. The very word sent a chill down her spine. Was it a complete annihilation? Or something more, insidious? She met Cale's gaze, searching for answers. "Tell me about the other path," she said, her voice steady despite the tremor that ran through her. Cale hesitated, his gaze shifting to the fire. He opened his mouth to speak, then closed it again. Finally, he said, "The other path, it's surrender. Not to the Shadow Lord, but to the darkness itself. An acceptance of its inevitability. emerging. He looked at Alara, his expression grave. It means becoming one with the shadow, losing ourselves completely. But it also means an end to the fighting, an end to the suffering, a twisted kind of peace. Alara shuddered. The thought of losing herself, of becoming part of the very darkness she had sworn to fight, filled her with a primal terror. But Kale's words also held a strange allure, an end to the suffering. Peace, words that resonated deeply within her weary soul. She had witnessed firsthand the devastation wrought by the Shadow Lord and his armies. She had seen friends fall, families torn apart, entire villages reduced to ashes. The endless cycle of violence had taken its toll, leaving her feeling drained, hollowed out. The promise of peace, even a twisted one, was a tempting siren song. She thought of her people, of the children growing up in a world consumed by war. What kind of future awaited them if the fighting continued? A Pyrrhic victory might banish the darkness, but what would be left to rebuild? What would be left to protect? The weight of the decision pressed down on her, threatening to crush her beneath its immense burden. She rose and walked to the edge of the clearing, gazing out at the star-strewn sky. The moon, a sliver of silver in the vast expanse, offered no guidance. The stars, cold and distant, seemed to mock her with their indifference. She thought of the warriors who had come before her, those who had fought and died to protect their land. She thought of the generations to come, those whose fate now rested in her hands. What would they choose? What was the right choice? Turning back to Kale, she saw the same struggle reflected in his eyes. He understood the gravity of the situation, the impossible choice she had to make. He offered no advice, no easy answers. He knew, as she did, that this was a burden she had to bear alone. Taking a deep breath, Alara drew her sword. The polished steel gleamed in the firelight, a symbol of her strength, her resolve. She held it aloft, the weight feeling surprisingly light in her hand. "There is a third path," she declared, her voice ringing with newfound conviction. The firelight danced in her eyes, reflecting not the fear and uncertainty of moments before, but a burning determination. A path the prophecy didn't foresee. Kale looked at her, startled. "A third path?" Alara nodded. "The prophecy speaks of victory or oblivion, of fighting or surrender. But it doesn't consider another possibility. What if we don't fight the darkness? What if we embrace it?" She lowered her sword, the tip resting on the ground. Not surrender to it, not become one with it, but understand it. Learn from it. Harness its power, not for destruction, but for creation. Kale stared at her, his eyes wide with disbelief. "But how?" Alara met his gaze, a faint smile playing on her lips. "The prophecy says the warrior must choose, but it doesn't say what that choice must be. It doesn't say we can't forge our own path. A path that leads not to victory or oblivion, but to something more." The stale air hung heavy, thick with the dust of centuries. A single flickering torch, clutched in Alara's trembling hand, cast long dancing shadows across the hieroglyph-covered walls. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the occasional drip of water echoing through the vast chamber. Fear, cold and clammy, gripped her heart. She swallowed hard, the metallic tang of blood filling her mouth where she'd bitten her lip. Beside her, Liam leaned against a towering sarcophagus, his breathing shallow and ragged. The poison, though slowed by Alara's quick thinking, was still working its way through his system. He needed the antidote, and soon. "We have to find another way out," Alara whispered, her voice barely audible above the drumming of her own pulse. The main entrance, sealed by a massive stone door triggered by their intrusion, was impassable. They were trapped. Liam, his face pale and drawn, managed a weak nod. He tried to speak, but only a choked gasp escaped his lips. Alara's stomach clenched. Time was running out. They moved deeper into the tomb, the flickering torchlight revealing more intricate carvings and ominous shadows. Every rustle of dust, every echo sent shivers down Alara's spine. She knew the legends surrounding this tomb, whispers of ancient curses and vengeful spirits. But she pushed the fear aside. Liam's life depended on her. They examined the walls, searching for any sign of a hidden passage, a secret exit. The hieroglyphs, a language Ilara was only beginning to understand, hinted at trials and tribulations, of paths to the afterlife fraught with danger. One symbol, a stylized serpent devouring its own tail, kept recurring. It seemed to beckon them forward, a silent promise of escape. Following the serpent symbol, they navigated a labyrinth of narrow corridors, each turn seeming to lead them deeper into the heart of the tomb. The air grew colder, and a faint, sweet smell began to permeate the air. Lotus blossoms, a scent incongruous with the deathly stillness of their surroundings. The corridor opened into a smaller chamber, circular in shape and dominated by a large, ornate basin filled with dark, still water. The serpent symbol was carved above the basin, its ruby eyes gleaming in the torchlight. Ilara felt a pull towards it, an almost hypnotic urge to touch the cool surface of the water. But something held her back. A sense of foreboding, a prickle of unease. Liam, weakened but determined, reached out and touched the water. Ripples spread across the surface, disturbing the reflection of the serpent. A low rumble shook the chamber, and the back wall began to slide open, revealing another passage, bathed in an ethereal green light. Lara gasped. It was a way out, but as the wall opened fully, they saw what lay beyond. Not a simple passage, but a narrow bridge, spanning a seemingly bottomless chasm. The air shimmered with an unnatural energy, and the faint scent of lotus blossoms intensified, becoming almost overpowering. Ilara hesitated, fear warring with the desperate need to escape. The chasm seemed to pulse with a hidden life, and the bridge, though seemingly solid, appeared fragile, almost ephemeral. "We have to risk it," Liam whispered, his voice stronger than before. The poison seemed to be receding, pushed back by the adrenaline coursing through his veins. Ilara nodded, her heart pounding in her chest. They stepped onto the bridge, the smooth stone cool beneath their feet. As they moved forward, the bridge began to sway precariously, the chasm yawning beneath them. The green glow intensified, revealing monstrous faces carved into the walls of the chasm, their eyes burning with malevolent intent. Whispers, faint and chilling, seemed to emanate from the depths, trying to lure them into the darkness. Lara gripped Liam's arm, her knuckles white. One misstep, and they would be lost. The bridge narrowed, becoming a mere sliver of stone suspended above the abyss. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, twisting into words that spoke of their fears, their doubts, their deepest regrets. Ilara felt a cold dread creeping into her soul, threatening to paralyze her with terror. But then she looked at Liam, his face set with determination, his eyes fixed on the other side. His strength, his unwavering resolve, gave her courage. She took a deep breath, pushing back the fear, and focused on putting one foot in front of the other. Slowly, painstakingly, they inched their way forward, the chasm seeming to stretch endlessly before them. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, they reached the other side. They stumbled onto solid ground, their legs weak with relief. The bridge dissolved behind them, disappearing into the green mist as if it had never existed. They were safe. For now. The passage they found themselves in was dimly lit, the air still thick with the scent of lotus blossoms. But the oppressive silence of the tomb was gone, replaced by the faint sound of rushing water. They followed the sound, their hope renewed, and soon they found themselves standing before a hidden exit, a small, unassuming opening concealed behind a waterfall. They stepped out into the cool night air, the stars a welcome sight after the darkness of the tomb. They had escaped. Ilara looked back at the waterfall, the entrance to the tomb now hidden from view. She knew they had been lucky. They had survived a trial designed to test their courage, their resilience, their faith in each other. And though they had escaped with their lives, she knew that the tomb and its secrets would forever be etched in their memories. They had cheated death once. But the serpent, she knew, never truly forgets. The first rays of sunlight, weak and hesitant, touched the tips of the eastern mountains. A pale luminescence spread across the sky, pushing back the lingering shadows of night. The air, still and crisp, held the promise of warmth. Birdsong, tentative at first, grew in volume and confidence, a chorus celebrating the arrival of a new day. After the long, harrowing night, dawn broke over the ravaged battlefield, painting the scene in hues of rose and gold. The remnants of the fire still smoldered, sending thin wisps of smoke into the brightening sky. The silence, broken only by the crackling embers and the distant chirping of birds, was heavy with the weight of what had transpired. The survivors, scattered and disoriented, began to stir. They emerged from the wreckage, their faces grim, their eyes reflecting the horrors they had witnessed. Some moved with a mechanical stiffness, their bodies aching, their spirits broken. Others, fueled by adrenaline and a desperate will to survive, moved with a frantic energy, searching for loved ones, for friends, for any sign of hope amidst the devastation. A low groan echoed across the field as a young woman, her arm bandaged crudely with a torn piece of cloth, tried to lift herself from beneath a pile of rubble. A man with a haunted look in his eyes stumbled through the debris, calling out a name that was swallowed by the vast emptiness. The weight of their losses pressed down on them, heavy and suffocating. The battlefield, once a scene of chaotic violence, was now a silent testament to their suffering. A small group huddled around a makeshift fire, their faces illuminated by the flickering flames. They shared what little food and water they had salvaged, their movements slow and deliberate. They spoke in hushed tones, recounting the events of the previous night, their voices thick with grief and disbelief. A young boy, his eyes wide with fear, clung to his mother's side, his small body trembling. An older man, his face etched with lines of worry, stared into the flames, his thoughts a jumble of fear and uncertainty. They were alive, yes, but the future stretched before them, bleak and uncertain. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, casting long shadows across the ravaged land, a sense of purpose began to flicker in the eyes of the survivors. They had endured the unimaginable, faced the darkness, and lived to see the dawn. The road ahead would be arduous, filled with challenges they could scarcely imagine, but they had survived. And in that survival they found a glimmer of hope, a spark of resilience that refused to be extinguished. They began to organize, to tend to the wounded, to salvage what they could from the wreckage. The task before them was monumental, but they faced it together, united by their shared experience, their shared loss, and their shared determination to rebuild. The sun continued its ascent, bathing the landscape in a warm golden light. The air, no longer still and cold, carried the scent of wood smoke and the faint, sweet fragrance of wildflowers blooming amidst the debris. The bird song, now a joyous chorus, filled the air, a testament to the enduring power of life. The survivors, their faces etched with weariness, but their eyes filled with a newfound resolve, began to clear the debris, to make plans to rebuild. They knew the road ahead would be long and difficult, but they also knew that they were not alone. They had each other, and that, they realized, was more than enough. One by one, they began to share their stories, their voices gaining strength with each word. They spoke of courage and sacrifice, of loss and resilience. They spoke of the darkness they had faced and the light that had guided them through. They spoke of the bonds that had been forged in the crucible of battle, bonds that would bind them together for the rest of their lives. As they spoke, a sense of community began to emerge, a shared understanding that transcended the horrors they had endured. They were survivors, yes, but they were also more than that. They were a family, forged in the fires of adversity, bound together by the shared experience of loss and the unwavering hope for a better future. The young boy, who had clung to his mother throughout the night, began to play amongst the ruins, his laughter a fragile melody against the backdrop of destruction. The older man, his face still etched with worry, placed a comforting hand on the boy's shoulder, a silent promise of protection. The young woman with the bandaged arm helped another survivor tend to the wounded, her movements no longer stiff but purposeful and determined. The man who had searched desperately for his loved ones found solace in the company of others, his grief shared, his burden lessened. They were a community, broken but not shattered, wounded but not defeated. As the sun reached its zenith, casting a brilliant light across the ravaged land, the survivors gathered together, their faces turned towards the future. They knew the road ahead would be long and arduous, but they also knew that they were not alone. They had each other, and in that shared strength, they found the courage to face the challenges that lay ahead, the hope to rebuild their lives, and the determination to create a better future from the ashes of the past. The dawn had broken, not just in the sky but in their hearts, and as they looked towards the horizon, they saw not just the devastation of what had been lost, but the promise of what could be. The first, Tentative steps towards rebuilding had been taken. The journey would be long, but they were ready. They had survived the night. They had witnessed the dawn. And they would face the future together. Ilara hummed a tuneless melody as she scrubbed the enormous, blackened pot. The kitchens of Castle Argentum were a symphony of clanging pans, sizzling fats, and the hurried footsteps of cooks. But Ilara remained in her corner, a solitary figure wrestling with the remnants of a particularly stubborn stew. She didn't mind the solitude. It gave her time to think, to dream of a life beyond the scullery. A life where her hands weren't perpetually red and raw. A life where the smell of lye and burnt food wasn't permanently etched into her clothes. She scrubbed harder, each stroke a small act of defiance against her current reality. The kitchen boy, Finn, a skinny lad with a perpetually mischievous grin, tossed a scrap of bread in her direction. Ilara caught it deftly, her fingers surprisingly nimble despite their chapped appearance. "For the pot scrubber," he chirped, his voice echoing in the cavernous kitchen. Ilara smiled, a rare and fleeting expression. "Thank you, Finn," she murmured, tearing the bread and savoring its plain, comforting taste. Small mercies were to be cherished in the castle kitchens. She continued her task, the rhythmic scraping a soothing counterpoint to the chaotic activity around her. The pot, once a testament to culinary disaster, slowly began to gleam. Ilara's reflection, pale and smudged, emerged from the darkening metal. She saw not a scullery maid, but a girl with fire in her eyes, a girl capable of more than scrubbing pots. A shadow fell over her. Ilara looked up, startled, to see the imposing figure of Chef Gaston, his face etched with a rare look of concern. "Ilara," he began, his voice gruff but not unkind. "There's been a development." Ilara's heart pounded in her chest. Developments in the castle kitchen were rarely good news. A broken oven, a shortage of flour, a royal tantrum over an undercooked pheasant. These were the typical developments that disrupted the delicate ecosystem of the kitchen hierarchy. Gaston continued, "The king's cousin, Prince Caius, is arriving unexpectedly. A feast is to be prepared, a grand feast. And, well, the head pastry chef has taken ill." Ilara's brow furrowed. What did this have to do with her? She was a pot scrubber, not a pastry chef. Gaston cleared his throat. "You have shown an aptitude for detail," he said, the words clearly unfamiliar on his tongue. "Your cleaning is meticulous. And I've seen you, observing cook Matilda's baking." Ilara blinked, a mixture of surprise and disbelief flooding through her. Was he suggesting? "We are desperate, Ilara. The king expects a magnificent dessert. Can you assist?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Ilara's heart soared. This was it, the chance she had been waiting for. The opportunity to prove she was more than just a pair of hands, more than just a cog in the kitchen machinery. "Yes, Chef Gaston," she said, her voice firm and clear. "I can assist." The kitchen became a whirlwind of activity. Ilara, guided by the sous chef, a nervous man named Pierre, was thrust into a world of flour, sugar, and delicate spices. She rolled dough, whipped cream, and arranged sugared fruits with a newfound confidence. She recalled Cook Matilda's instructions, the little tricks and secrets the older woman had muttered under her breath while preparing the royal desserts. Ilara's hands, usually rough and red, moved with surprising grace and precision. She poured all her hopes and dreams into each delicate tartlet, each elaborate cake, each perfectly formed cookie. The hours flew by. The scent of baking pastries mingled with the savory aromas of roasting meats and simmering sauces. The kitchen staff, initially skeptical of the pot scrubber's promotion, began to watch her with a grudging respect. Even Finn stopped his usual teasing, his eyes wide with admiration as he watched Ilara transform simple ingredients into culinary masterpieces. Finally, the feast was ready. The grand hall was ablaze with light, the tables laden with a dazzling array of dishes. Ilara, exhausted but exhilarated, watched from the kitchen doorway as the guests, resplendent in their finery, filed into the hall. Her heart pounded as Prince Caius, a handsome man with a kind smile, took his seat at the king's table. The feast progressed. Each course met with murmurs of appreciation. And then the moment arrived. The desserts were presented, Ilara's creations taking center stage. The guests gasped, their eyes widening at the sight of the elaborate pastries, the delicate tarts, the towering cakes. Prince Caius tasted a small, almond-shaped cookie, his eyes closing in appreciation. "Magnificent," he declared, his voice carrying across the hall. "These are the most exquisite pastries I have ever tasted." The king beamed, his chest swelling with pride. He turned to Chef Gaston, who, in turn, gestured towards Ilara. The king's gaze fell upon the young scullery maid, still standing nervously in the doorway. "You," he boomed, "come forward." Ilara stepped into the light, her simple dress a stark contrast to the finery surrounding her. She curtsied, her heart pounding in her chest. "These pastries," the king declared, "are a testament to your skill. What is your name, girl?" "Ilara, your majesty," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Ilara," the king repeated, a smile gracing his lips. "You have a gift. From this day forward, you shall be the royal pastry chef of Castle Argentum." A gasp rippled through the hall. Ilara's eyes widened, tears welling up. She had done it. She had escaped the scullery. She had found her place. The pot scrubber had finally received her reward. The tavern's usual raucous laughter was subdued, replaced by a nervous hum. The air, thick with the smell of stale ale and wood smoke, crackled with unspoken anxieties. Men huddled in corners, their voices low, casting worried glances at the newly posted notice on the warped wooden door. It was a call to arms, a stark reminder of the growing tension that had been simmering beneath the surface of their everyday lives for months. The king's crimson seal glared from the parchment, a silent declaration that the whispers of war were about to become a deafening roar. Ilara, perched on a stool near the hearth, watched the patrons with a troubled frown. The notice mirrored the unease swirling in her own gut. She'd seen the subtle shifts, the increased patrols, the worried faces of the farmers bringing their meager harvest to market. War was a hungry beast, and it was coming to feed. Kalen entered the tavern, his usual jovial demeanor replaced by a grim set to his jaw. He noticed Ilara immediately, the worry etched on her face mirroring his own. He joined her at the hearth, their conversation starting in the middle, a shared understanding passing between them without the need for words. The call to arms wasn't unexpected, but it was a stark confirmation of their worst fears. The border skirmishes, the intercepted messages, the escalating rhetoric between the kingdoms, all pointed to this inevitable outcome. They spoke of the potential devastation, the loss of life, the disruption to the fragile peace they had known. Kalen, a seasoned warrior, knew the horrors of battle firsthand. He'd seen friends fall, families torn apart, and the scars, both physical and emotional, that lingered long after the last sword was sheathed. He didn't want that for Ilara, for their village, for their world. Their quiet conversation was interrupted by the boisterous entrance of Gareth, the village blacksmith, his face flushed with a mixture of bravado and fear. He slapped a hand on Kalen's back, the force of it jarring. He declared loudly, for all the tavern to hear, that he was ready to answer the king's call to defend their land against the encroaching enemy. His words, though meant to inspire, were laced with a nervous tremor. The other patrons, spurred by Gareth's display, began to echo his sentiments, their voices rising in a mixture of fear and forced enthusiasm. Ilara watched the scene unfold with a growing sense of dread. This forced bravado, this desperate attempt to mask their fear, was a familiar prelude to the horrors to come. She knew that behind the boisterous declarations and the clinking of tankards lay a deep-seated fear, a fear that mirrored her own. Ilara, unlike the others in the tavern, possessed a secret, a burden she carried that separated her from the rest. She was a whisper, gifted or perhaps cursed, with the ability to hear the thoughts and emotions of others. It was a gift that had often been a source of solace and understanding, but now it was a torment. The cacophony of fear, doubt, and desperation swirling around her was overwhelming. She could hear the unspoken fears behind Garrett's bravado, the quiet resignation of the older men, the terrified prayers of the young boys barely old enough to shave, let alone wield a sword. She felt the weight of their collective fear pressing down on her, suffocating her. She longed for silence, for a moment of respite from the constant barrage of emotions. She excused herself from Kalen and Gareth, slipping out the back of the tavern into the cool night air. Under the cloak of the star-dusted sky, Ilara sought refuge in the whispering willows by the riverbank. Here, away from the oppressive atmosphere of the tavern, she closed her eyes and focused, trying to filter out the noise, to find a semblance of peace within the storm raging within her. The whispers of the willows, carried on the gentle breeze, soothed her frayed nerves. She thought of her family, of the life they had built together in this small village, a life now threatened by the looming war. She thought of Kalen, his strong hands, his gentle smile, and the unwavering love she saw in his eyes. The thought of him marching off to war, of the potential for him to never return, filled her with a chilling fear. As she sat there, lost in her thoughts, she sensed a presence nearby. Opening her eyes, she saw a hooded figure standing in the shadows beneath the willows. The figure remained silent, its face obscured by the deep shadows of the hood. Fear, sharp and cold, pierced through Ilara. She could feel the figure's intense focus on her, a palpable sense of scrutiny that sent shivers down her spine. She tried to read the figure's thoughts, to understand their intentions, but she was met with an impenetrable wall, a blankness that was more unsettling than any overt hostility. The silence stretched, thick with unspoken tension. Finally, the figure spoke, its voice a low, raspy whisper that seemed to slither through the air. "The whispers of war are growing louder," the figure said, its words hanging heavy in the air. "And they speak of you." The figure's cryptic words sent a jolt of fear through Ilara. Who was this mysterious figure, and what did they know about her? Her secret, her ability to hear the whispers of others, had always been carefully guarded. The thought that someone, especially someone so shrouded in secrecy, knew about her gift, filled her with a deep sense of unease. Before she could respond, before she could demand answers, the figure turned and melted back into the shadows, leaving Ilara alone with her fear and the chilling echo of their words. The whispers of war indeed were growing louder, and now they seemed to be whispering her name. The weight of her secret, combined with the impending war, pressed down on her, a heavy burden that threatened to crush her beneath its weight. She knew, with a certainty that chilled her to the bone, that her life, and the lives of everyone she loved, were about to change forever. Lord Akiyama stared out at the meticulously manicured gardens, the vibrant greens and bursts of color doing little to soothe the turmoil within him. A single koi, fat and orange, broke the surface of the pond, its mouth opening and closing silently. The gesture mirrored Akiyama's own unspoken struggle. The shogun's decree was absolute: provide troops for the campaign against the northern barbarians or face the consequences. Consequences that could mean the stripping of his lands, his title, his very honor. Yet, to send his samurai north was to leave his own province vulnerable. The whispers of rebellion, once faint rumors carried on the wind, were growing louder, fueled by the disgruntled peasantry burdened by heavy taxes. He rubbed his temples, the weight of the decision pressing down on him. His advisors had argued amongst themselves for days, splitting into two distinct factions. One, led by the stoic Lord Matsumoto, urged unwavering loyalty to the shogun. Matsumoto argued that defying the decree would be an act of treason, inviting swift and brutal retribution. The shogun's forces, even stretched thin by the northern campaign, were still a formidable power. Open defiance would be suicide. Better to comply, however painful, and preserve what they could. The other faction, headed by the fiery Lady Hana, argued for defiance. They saw the shogun's demand as an opportunity. With the shogun's armies preoccupied in the north, the time was ripe to push for greater autonomy, perhaps even independence. They spoke of rallying the neighboring provinces, forming an alliance strong enough to resist the shogunate's grasp. Lady Hana, her eyes flashing with conviction, had declared, "Better to die fighting for freedom than to kneel in servitude." Each argument held a sliver of truth, a dangerous shard reflecting a different aspect of the dilemma. Loyalty to the shogun was deeply ingrained in Akiyama, a principle passed down through generations. Yet the plight of his people, the growing unrest within his own province, could not be ignored. He could not, in good conscience, condemn them to further suffering for the sake of blind obedience. The setting sun cast long shadows across the garden, painting the scene in hues of orange and purple. The air grew colder, a subtle shift that mirrored the chill settling in Akiyama's heart. He was caught between the proverbial rock and a hard place. To obey the shogun was to betray his people. To defy him was to risk annihilation. Either path led to ruin. He turned from the window, his gaze settling on the map of his province spread across the table in his study. Each river, each mountain pass, each village represented a piece of the puzzle he was desperately trying to solve. He traced the route the shogun's messengers had taken, their swift journey a stark reminder of the urgency of the situation. He then traced the potential paths of rebellion, the whispers of discontent coalescing into potential flashpoints. Sleep eluded him that night. He paced the confines of his room, the floorboards creaking beneath his restless steps. The faces of his advisors, of his people, swam before his eyes. Lord Matsumoto's stern countenance, Lady Hana's fiery gaze, the weary faces of the farmers toiling in the fields, each face a silent plea, a weight added to the burden he already carried. The first rays of dawn found him still awake, his mind weary but finally clear. A third option, a dangerous gamble, had taken root in his thoughts. He summoned his most trusted advisors, Lord Matsumoto and Lady Hana among them. He laid out his plan, his voice calm despite the turmoil within. He would send a token force north, just enough to appease the shogun and avoid immediate repercussions. This force, however, would be comprised of his least experienced samurai, led by a commander known for his caution. Their orders would be to avoid direct engagement, to remain on the fringes of the campaign. Meanwhile, he would secretly begin bolstering his own defenses, strengthening his alliances with neighboring daimyos who shared his concerns. He would address the grievances of his people, easing their burdens and quelling the whispers of rebellion. He would prepare for the inevitable confrontation with the shogun, but he would do so from a position of strength, not desperation. It was a risky strategy, a delicate dance on the edge of a knife. One wrong step could send him tumbling into the abyss. Yet, it was the only path he saw that offered even a glimmer of hope. Lord Matsumoto, ever the pragmatist, expressed his reservations, warning of the potential consequences of deceiving the shogun. Lady Hana, however, saw the wisdom in Akiyama's plan, a cunning blend of appeasement and defiance. She pledged her unwavering support, her eyes gleaming with a newfound respect for the daimyo. The decision made, a heavy weight lifted from Akiyama's shoulders. He had chosen a path fraught with danger, but it was a path of his own making. He would play the shogun's game, but he would play it by his own rules. He would protect his people, even if it meant defying the will of the most powerful man in the land. The koi in the garden pond swam in peaceful circles, oblivious to the storm brewing on the horizon. But Lord Akiyama was ready. He had made his choice, and he would face the consequences, whatever they may be, with the courage and cunning of a true daimyo. He had embraced the dilemma, and in doing so, had forged his own destiny. The moon, a spectral eye in the inky sky, cast long skeletal shadows across the clearing. A chill wind whispered through the pines, stirring the fallen leaves into rustling eddies. Lysandra stood poised, her silver rapier gleaming faintly in the moonlight, its tip pointed towards her opponent. Across from her, Cassian, his face etched with a grim determination, held his broadsword at the ready. The tension between them crackled like static in the air. Neither spoke, the weight of their unspoken words hanging heavier than the impending clash of steel. Lysandra had insisted on this duel. After weeks of simmering resentment, fueled by Cassian's unwavering loyalty to a cause she believed to be misguided, she'd finally snapped. The argument had escalated, voices rising, accusations thrown like daggers. Finally, Lysandra, her pride wounded and her patience frayed, had challenged him. A duel to settle their differences. A duel to prove, once and for all, who was right. Cassian had accepted, his jaw tight, his eyes burning with a mixture of anger and hurt. He couldn't understand her sudden shift in allegiance. He believed they were on the same side, fighting for the same ideals. But now she stood before him, not as an ally, but as an adversary. The first clash of steel rang out, sharp and clear, shattering the stillness of the night. Lysandra moved with the grace and agility of a panther, her rapier darting in and out, probing Cassian's defenses. Cassian, though larger and stronger, was forced to rely on his brute strength to parry her swift attacks. The broadsword, a weapon more suited to open battle, felt clumsy and unwieldy against her nimble blade. Sparks flew as steel met steel, the rhythmic clang echoing through the trees. Lysandra pressed her attack, a whirlwind of motion forcing Cassian to retreat. He parried desperately, his arms growing heavy, his breath coming in ragged gasps. He knew he couldn't sustain this defensive strategy for long. He needed to find an opening, a chance to strike back. He saw his opportunity as Lysandra lunged, her rapier aimed at his chest. With a grunt of exertion, he parried the blow, the force of the impact jarring his arm, but he'd created the space he needed. He swung his broadsword in a wide arc, aiming to disarm her. Lysandra anticipated the move. She ducked under the swing, the blade whistling harmlessly over her head, and darted forward, her rapier finding its mark. The tip grazed Cassian's arm, drawing a thin line of blood. Cassian staggered back, surprised by the speed and precision of her attack. He hadn't expected her to be so ruthless. He saw a flicker of something in her eyes. Not just anger, but a deep, unsettling sadness. He realized then that this duel wasn't just about their differing opinions. It was about something more profound, something buried deep within her. He lowered his sword slightly, his stance less aggressive. "Lysandra," he began, his voice hoarse. "Why are you doing this?" Lysandra hesitated, her rapier still poised. The moonlight caught the tear that traced a path down her cheek. "Don't you understand, Cassian?" she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "They've taken everything from me. My family, my home, my hope." Cassian's heart ached for her. He knew of the hardships she'd endured, the losses she'd suffered, but he didn't understand how that justified her current actions, her alignment with those who threatened the very foundations of their world. "I understand your pain," he said softly, "but this isn't the way." Lysandra shook her head, her eyes blazing with a renewed intensity. "There is no other way. They are the only ones who can give me what I want. Revenge." The word hung in the air, heavy with the weight of her grief and anger. Cassian knew then that he couldn't reach her. Not now. He raised his broadsword again, his face grim. He wouldn't fight her with the same ferocity she displayed, but he wouldn't let her win either. He had to stop her, even if it meant hurting her. The duel resumed, but the dynamic had shifted. Cassian fought defensively, parrying her attacks, trying to disarm her without inflicting serious injury. Lysandra, fueled by her rage, fought with a desperate abandon, her attacks becoming increasingly reckless. Finally, after a flurry of blows and parries, Cassian saw his chance. He parried her thrust, his broadsword deflecting her rapier wide, and with a swift movement, disarmed her. The silver blade flew through the air, landing with a soft thud in the grass. Lysandra stood there, disarmed and defeated, her chest heaving, tears streaming down her face. Cassian lowered his broadsword, his heart heavy with a mixture of relief and sorrow. He had won the duel, but he felt no sense of triumph. He stepped towards her, his hand outstretched. "Lysandra," he said softly, "I don't want to fight you." She looked at him, her eyes filled with pain and confusion. "Then why? Why did you—" He reached out and gently wiped away a tear from her cheek. "Because I care about you," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "And I can't let you throw your life away on this quest for revenge." She didn't respond, but the fire in her eyes seemed to have dimmed, replaced by a flicker of uncertainty. The moonlight bathed the clearing in a soft glow, illuminating the two figures standing amidst the fallen leaves. The silence broken only by the rustling of the wind in the pines. The duel was over, but the battle for Lysandra's soul had just begun. The ornate clock ticked, a rhythmic counterpoint to the hushed whispers echoing in the dimly lit chamber. Chancellor Theron paced before the roaring fireplace, his shadow dancing across the tapestries depicting ancient battles. "The treaty," he muttered, more to himself than to the assembled council. "It's a powder keg, a carefully constructed illusion of peace, concealing a fuse that could ignite a war more devastating than any we've known." He stopped, fixing his gaze on the council members, each one a representative of the 7 kingdoms bound by the fragile treaty. The balance of power is a lie. The Orlesian Empire, feigning compliance, amasses its legions even now. Their factories churn day and night, producing weaponry at an alarming rate. Our spies confirm it. They mean to break the treaty. They mean to conquer. Lady Isolde, representative of the Elven Kingdom of Eldoria, spoke, her voice sharp and clear. "Chancellor, such accusations are serious. We need proof, not whispers and rumors. The Orlesians have been our allies for decades. This treaty brought an end to generations of bloodshed. Are you suggesting we dismantle this hard-won peace on speculation? Theron sighed, running a hand through his silver hair. He turned, gesturing to a shadowed corner of the room. Lord Valerius, if you would be so kind? A figure emerged from the gloom. He was cloaked, his face obscured by a deep cowl. Lord Valerius, Theron continued, is the head of our intelligence network. He has spent the last 6 months infiltrating the Orlesian court. He has seen firsthand the evidence that supports my claim. Valerius's voice was a low rasp, devoid of emotion. The Orlesian emperor, ostensibly committed to the treaty's terms, conducts secret negotiations with the barbarous tribes of the northern wastes. He promises them lands, resources, and the blood of their ancient enemies, us, in exchange for their allegiance in the coming war. He produced a scroll, its edges worn and stained, and laid it before the council. This is a copy of the agreement. The emperor's seal is upon it. A murmur rippled through the assembled council members. The scroll was passed from hand to hand, each representative scrutinizing the damning evidence. The implications were staggering. If the Orlesians allied themselves with the northern wastes, their combined forces would be unstoppable. The treaty had stipulated a reduction in military forces across all 7 kingdoms. It had called for the dismantling of fortifications and the cessation of weapons production. While the other kingdoms had adhered to the treaty's terms, the Orlesians, under the guise of peace, had been preparing for war. They had used the treaty as a shield, lulling their neighbors into a false sense of security while secretly amassing a force capable of conquering them all. Theron addressed the council again, his voice heavy with the weight of the impending crisis. We cannot afford to ignore this. We must act swiftly and decisively. The treaty is a trap, a clever deception orchestrated by the Orlesians to seize control. We must prepare for war. Lord Valerius stepped forward once more. There is more. The Orlesians have not only been bolstering their own forces, they have been actively sabotaging ours. Their agents have infiltrated our supply lines, poisoning our food stores and weakening our defenses. Our own soldiers are being unknowingly sabotaged from within. The council chamber erupted in a cacophony of shocked exclamations and angry protests. The revelation that the Orlesians had been actively working to undermine their supposed allies from within struck a deeper chord of betrayal. The treaty, once a symbol of hope and unity, now appeared as a monument to their collective naivete. Proof, Lady Isolde demanded, her voice trembling with barely suppressed rage. We need proof of these accusations. This could be a fabrication, a ploy to sow discord amongst us. Valerius produced a small vial filled with a dark, viscous liquid. This, he explained, is the poison. It is slow-acting, designed to weaken and debilitate over time. It has been found in the food supplies of several garrisons across the allied kingdoms. Its unique composition can be traced directly to Orlesian alchemists. He then revealed a series of coded messages, intercepted by his agents, detailing the sabotage operations and confirming the Orlesian involvement. The evidence was irrefutable. The Orlesian treachery was laid bare for all to see. The treaty, meant to ensure peace, had become the very instrument of their potential downfall. The council, initially skeptical, was now united in its outrage and determination to act. Chancellor Theron surveyed the faces of the council members, his own grim but resolute. The treaty is dead, he declared. The Orlesians have shattered it with their deceit. We must now prepare for the inevitable. We must forge new alliances, strengthen our defenses, and prepare to defend our lands against the coming storm. The time for peace is over. The time for war is at hand. The clock chimed, its solemn tones marking not just the passage of another hour, but the end of an era and the beginning of a new, uncertain future. The rhythmic clang of metal on metal echoed through the forge. Sparks danced like fireflies in the gloom, illuminating Taro's focused face, his brow furrowed in concentration as he hammered a piece of glowing steel. He didn't even look up as Kenji entered, the scent of wood smoke clinging to his clothes. "Still at it, Taro?" Kenji asked, his voice carrying over the din. Taro grunted in response, his hammer continuing its relentless rhythm. Finally, with a satisfied sigh, he plunged the glowing metal into a bucket of water, the resulting hiss and steam momentarily obscuring him from view. He emerged, wiping sweat from his brow with the back of his hand, a grim smile playing on his lips. "Almost ready." "Ready for what?" Kenji pressed, a knot of unease tightening in his stomach. He'd noticed a change in Taro recently, a subtle shift in his demeanor that made him uneasy. Taro turned, his eyes, usually bright and full of laughter, were now cold and hard, ready to take what's rightfully mine. Kenji felt a chill run down his spine. He'd always known Taro was ambitious. But this was different. "What are you talking about?" "Don't play coy, Kenji," Taro sneered, tossing the now cooled piece of metal, a wickedly sharp dagger from hand to hand. "You know as well as I do that I'm the better blacksmith. I deserve the master's title, not you." Kenji's breath hitched. The master's title. It was something they'd both been striving for, training tirelessly under the watchful eye of old man Hiroshi. But Kenji had always believed it would be a friendly rivalry, a test of skill and dedication. He'd never imagined Taro would resort to this. "Taro, we can both be masters," Kenji pleaded, trying to reason with him. "Old man Hiroshi always said there's enough skill to go around." Taro laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "Old man Hiroshi is old and blind. He can't see the truth. He can't see that I'm the only one worthy of his legacy." The dagger flashed in the firelight, its sharp point glinting menacingly. Kenji took a step back, his hand instinctively moving towards the hammer resting on the anvil. He didn't want to fight Taro, but he wouldn't let him hurt him either. "You're wrong, Taro," Kenji said, his voice trembling slightly. "This isn't the way." "There's only one way," Taro snarled, lunging forward with surprising speed. The dagger whistled through the air, aimed straight for Kenji's heart. Kenji reacted instinctively, raising his hammer to deflect the blow. The metal shrieked as the two weapons collided, sending vibrations up Kenji's arm. He staggered back, the force of the blow nearly knocking him off his feet. Taro pressed his attack, a whirlwind of fury and steel. Kenji parried desperately, the clang of their weapons echoing through the forge. He knew he couldn't keep this up forever. Taro was stronger, faster, driven by a dark energy Kenji couldn't comprehend. As they fought, Kenji noticed something strange. Taro's movements, while powerful, were also predictable. It was as if he was following a set pattern, a series of predetermined strikes. He realized then that Taro's rage, his obsession with the master's title, had blinded him. He was so focused on proving his superiority that he'd forgotten the most important lesson old man Hiroshi had taught them: adaptability. Seeing his opening, Kenji sidestepped a wild swing, bringing his hammer down on Taro's wrist with a sickening crunch. The dagger clattered to the stone floor, and Taro cried out in pain, clutching his injured hand. Kenji stood over him, hammer raised, his heart pounding in his chest. He could end it now, strike the final blow. But he hesitated. This wasn't him. He couldn't bring himself to hurt Taro, not like this. "Why Taro?" Kenji asked, his voice thick with emotion. "Why are you doing this?" Taro looked up at him, his eyes filled with a mixture of pain and hatred. "Because I deserve it," he hissed. "I'm the best. I should be the master." Kenji lowered his hammer slowly. "You are skilled, Taro," he said softly. "But skill alone isn't enough. A true master isn't just about strength and technique. It's about honor, integrity, and respect." He looked down at Taro's injured hand, then at the discarded dagger. "You've lost your way, Taro," he said sadly. "I hope you find it again." He turned and walked away, leaving Taro alone in the flickering firelight of the forge, the echoes of their battle hanging heavy in the air. The master's title suddenly felt heavy, a burden he hadn't anticipated. He hadn't won, not really. He had simply survived. And as he walked out into the cool night air, he knew that the true test was yet to come. He had to find a way to help Taro, to bring him back from the darkness that had consumed him. He had to, not just for Taro, but for himself. Because he knew, deep down, that Taro's true colors, the ones buried beneath the layers of ambition and rage, were still there, waiting to be rediscovered. The air hung thick and heavy, the scent of dust and decay clinging to the back of Amelia's throat. The flickering light of her torch danced across the hieroglyphs carved into the tomb walls, illuminating scenes of ancient rituals and forgotten gods. This chamber, unlike the others, was circular, the walls smooth and unadorned save for the single, imposing stone door sealed with an intricate lock. This was it, the heart of the tomb, the final resting place of the Serpent King. "This is unsettling," muttered Daniel, his voice hushed with awe and a touch of apprehension. He ran a hand across the cold stone of the door, tracing the lines of the lock. "I've never seen anything like this." Amelia agreed. The lock wasn't just complex, it seemed almost alive. Intricate gears and levers meshed together, forming a puzzle that looked more like clockwork than anything she'd encountered in ancient Egyptian architecture. "It's almost mechanical," she whispered, her fingers itching to touch the cold metal. The air grew colder, a palpable shift that sent shivers down Amelia's spine. The torch flickered violently, casting grotesque shadows that danced and writhed on the walls. A low hum resonated from the lock, vibrating through the floor and into their bones. The lock clicked. A single, sharp sound that echoed in the silence. Then another, and another. Gears began to turn, levers shifted, and the intricate mechanism whirred to life, as if awakened from a centuries-long slumber. Amelia and Daniel exchanged a look of stunned disbelief. The lock was unlocking itself. With a groan of ancient stone, the door began to slide open, revealing a darkness so profound it seemed to swallow the light from their torches. A wave of cold air rushed out, carrying with it the same unsettling hum that emanated from the lock. The scent of decay intensified, mingled with something else, something metallic and sharp, like the smell of blood. Amelia gripped her torch tighter, her heart pounding against her ribs. "Ready?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Daniel nodded, his face pale but determined. He drew his pistol, the metallic click echoing in the cavernous chamber. Together they stepped into the darkness. The chamber beyond the door was smaller than they expected, circular like the outer chamber. In the center, bathed in an ethereal green glow emanating from an unseen source, lay a sarcophagus. It wasn't made of stone, but of a dark, polished metal, etched with symbols that mirrored those on the lock. As they approached, the humming grew louder, resonating with the beating of their hearts. The green glow pulsed, casting eerie shadows that danced and shifted around them. Amelia felt a strange pull, a magnetic force drawing her towards the sarcophagus. She reached out a trembling hand, her fingers brushing against the cold, smooth metal. The moment her skin made contact, the humming intensified, and the green glow flared. The symbols on the sarcophagus began to glow, illuminating the chamber with an unearthly light. The air crackled with energy, and Amelia felt a jolt pass through her body, a strange, unsettling sensation that made her head spin. She stumbled back, gasping for breath. Daniel rushed to her side, his eyes wide with concern. "Amelia, are you all right?" She nodded, trying to shake off the dizziness. I don't know. I felt something." Suddenly, a voice echoed through the chamber, a voice that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. It was ancient and resonant, filled with power and sorrow. "The time has come," the voice boomed, "for the Serpent King to awaken." The sarcophagus began to vibrate, the humming reaching a fever pitch. The green glow pulsed rapidly, bathing the chamber in a blinding light. Amelia and Daniel shielded their eyes, bracing themselves for the unknown. The metal lid of the sarcophagus began to slide open, revealing nothing. Confused, Amelia and Daniel lowered their hands, peering into the empty sarcophagus. There was no body, no mummy, no treasure, nothing but the same ethereal green glow emanating from the bottom of the coffin. Where is he?" Daniel whispered, his voice filled with confusion. The voice echoed again, this time closer, more intimate, as if whispering directly into their minds. "He is not here," the voice said. "He is within you." Amelia gasped, a sudden realization dawning in her mind. The strange pull, the jolt of energy, the unsettling feeling, it wasn't the Serpent King awakening. It was something else entirely. It was the transfer of knowledge, of power, of consciousness. The green glow faded, the humming ceased, and the sarcophagus fell silent. The chamber was plunged into darkness once more, the only light coming from their flickering torches. Amelia and Daniel stood there, frozen in place, the weight of the voice's words pressing down on them. The Serpent King wasn't a person. It was an entity, a consciousness, waiting to be reborn, and it had chosen Amelia as its vessel. The final secret of the tomb wasn't a treasure or a curse. It was a legacy, a terrifying, awe-inspiring legacy that now resided within her. And with that realization, Amelia knew that her life, and perhaps the fate of the world, would never be the same. Ilara traced the inscription on the weathered headstone, her fingers catching on the rough, moss-covered granite. Beloved wife and mother, it read, the words a stark reminder of the life stolen, the future shattered. Moonlight bathed the graveyard in an ethereal glow, casting long, dancing shadows that seemed to whisper secrets of the past. This place, this silent city of stone, held the answers she sought, the truth buried beneath layers of time and grief. The chill wind carried the scent of rain and damp earth, a familiar perfume of her childhood spent exploring these hallowed grounds. Back then they were a playground, a place of hushed wonder. Now they were a repository of sorrow, each stone a monument to loss. The weight of the pendant nestled against her chest, a comforting warmth against the encroaching cold. The moonstone, a gift from her mother, pulsed with a soft inner light, mirroring the celestial orb hanging high above. It was more than a trinket. It was a legacy, a tangible piece of the past connecting her to the woman she barely remembered. The memories were fragmented, fleeting glimpses of a gentle smile, a warm embrace, the scent of lavender and chamomile. These fragments, precious and elusive, were all she had left. She had come to this place seeking solace, seeking answers. The cryptic journal entries, filled with her mother's elegant script and coded language, hinted at a hidden truth, a secret legacy passed down through generations. The moonstone, she now understood, was the key. It was not merely a beautiful ornament, but a conduit, a vessel containing the essence of her family's history, their magic, their power. The wind picked up, rustling the leaves of the ancient oak that stood sentinel over the graves. A shiver ran down Ilara's spine, not entirely from the cold. She felt a presence, a watchful gaze that seemed to emanate from the shadows. Fear, sharp and cold, pricked at the edges of her awareness, but it was quickly overtaken by a surge of determination. She would not be deterred. She would uncover the truth, no matter the cost. Clutching the pendant, Ilara closed her eyes, focusing on the warmth radiating from the moonstone. She whispered the incantation etched on its back, words passed down from mother to daughter for centuries. The air crackled with unseen energy, and the ground beneath her feet vibrated with a low, resonant hum. A spectral figure materialized before her, shimmering and translucent in the moonlight. It was her mother, her face etched with a familiar sadness, but her eyes alight with a fierce, unwavering love. The spectral image spoke, her voice a soft whisper carried on the wind. "The time has come, Ilara," she said, her voice filled with a gentle urgency. "The legacy awaits." She gestured towards a hidden alcove behind her mother's headstone, concealed by overgrown ivy. "The answers you seek lie within." With trembling hands, Ilara pushed aside the tangled vines, revealing a small wooden box. It was intricately carved with celestial symbols, mirroring the markings on the pendant. Inside, nestled on a bed of faded velvet, lay a book bound in aged leather. Its pages, brittle with age, were filled with the same elegant script as her mother's journal, but the language was no longer coded. It was the history of her family, their lineage traced back through generations of women who possessed the gift of moonlight, the power to manipulate the very essence of the moon's energy. The book spoke of ancient rituals, of forgotten ceremonies performed beneath the full moon, of a power that lay dormant within Ilara, waiting to be awakened. It spoke of a prophecy, a destiny intertwined with the celestial dance of the sun and moon, a responsibility she now inherited. As she read, Ilara felt a shift within her, a stirring of something ancient and powerful. The moonstone pulsed against her skin, its light growing brighter, resonating with the energy coursing through her veins. She now understood the significance of her mother's sacrifice, the reason for her cryptic messages, the urgency in her final words. The legacy was not just a gift, it was a burden, a responsibility to protect the balance of the celestial forces, to safeguard the world from the encroaching darkness. The shadows that danced in the graveyard were not merely figments of her imagination. They were real, tangible manifestations of the forces that sought to disrupt the delicate harmony of the universe. The spectral image of her mother reached out, her hand passing through Ilara's as if to offer comfort and strength. "Embrace your destiny, Ilara," she whispered. "The moonlight is your birthright. The stars are your guide." Then, with a final, loving smile, she faded away, leaving Ilara alone in the moonlit graveyard, the weight of her legacy heavy upon her shoulders. Closing the book, Ilara clutched it to her chest, the leather cool against her skin. The fear she had felt earlier was gone, replaced by a quiet resolve. She was no longer just Ilara, the grieving daughter. She was the inheritor of the moonlight, the guardian of the celestial balance. The journey ahead would be fraught with danger, but she was ready. The moonstone pulsed with a steady rhythm, a beacon of hope in the encroaching darkness. She was not alone. She had the legacy of moonlight, the power of her ancestors, and the unwavering love of her mother to guide her. She looked up at the moon, its light bathing her in its silvery glow, and whispered, "I am ready." The wind whispered secrets through the towering pines, a mournful sigh that echoed the unease churning in Ilara's stomach. The forest, once a sanctuary, now felt oppressive, the shadows stretching long and menacing in the twilight. Each rustle of leaves, each snap of a twig, sent a jolt of adrenaline through her, tightening the knot of fear that had taken root since they'd entered the whispering pines. Liam walked beside her, his hand resting on the hilt of his sword, his jaw clenched tight. He, too, felt the shift in the atmosphere, the palpable sense of being watched. Neither of them spoke, their silence amplifying the forest's unsettling whispers. They both knew, without uttering a word, that they were walking into something dangerous. Their mission had seemed simple enough: retrieve the sunstone from the abandoned shrine hidden deep within the whispering pines. The ancient texts spoke of the stone's power, a source of immense energy that could turn the tide of the war. But the texts also warned of the forest's guardians, spirits bound to protect the stone from those who would misuse its power. Ilara shivered, pulling her cloak tighter around her. The air grew colder, the scent of pine needles giving way to a metallic tang that made her stomach churn. She could feel the weight of the sunstone's power, a distant hum that resonated deep within her bones. They pressed on, following the narrow, overgrown path that snaked through the trees. The light faded, swallowed by the dense canopy overhead, plunging them into near darkness. Liam produced a small, glowing orb, illuminating their immediate surroundings with an ethereal light. The trees seemed to lean in, their gnarled branches reaching like skeletal fingers. Twisted faces appeared in the bark, leering at them from the shadows. Ilara knew they weren't real, mere tricks of the light and her own frayed nerves, but the sight sent shivers down her spine. They had ventured too deep into the heart of the forest, a place where the veil between worlds thinned, where the whispers of the spirits grew louder. Suddenly the forest floor began to tremble. The ground beneath their feet shifted, the trees swaying violently as a low, guttural growl echoed through the pines. Liam's hand tightened on his sword, his eyes scanning the shadows. A pair of luminous eyes appeared in the darkness, followed by another, and another, until they were surrounded by a pack of spectral wolves, their forms shimmering in the dim light. Their growls intensified, a chorus of menace that sent a wave of fear washing over Ilara. She knew these were not ordinary wolves, but the guardians of the forest, the spirits spoken of in the ancient texts. Liam stepped forward, his sword drawn, its blade gleaming in the ethereal light. "Ilara, stay behind me," he commanded, his voice low and steady. She nodded, drawing her own dagger, her hand trembling. The wolves circled them, their eyes burning with an otherworldly fire. They were fast, their movements fluid and silent, like phantoms in the night. One lunged, its jaws snapping shut inches from Liam's arm. He parried the attack, his sword clashing against the spectral form, the sound echoing through the silent forest. The other wolves joined the attack, their shadowy forms darting in and out of the darkness, making it impossible to defend against them all. Lara fought alongside Liam, her dagger a blur of motion as she deflected the snapping jaws and spectral claws. But the wolves were relentless, their numbers seemingly endless. She felt a sharp pain in her arm as a wolf's claw grazed her skin, the wound burning with an icy fire. She stumbled back, her breath catching in her throat. Liam, seeing her falter, called out to her, his voice laced with concern. He pushed back the wolves surrounding him, creating a small opening for her to escape. "Ilara, run. Find the shrine. I'll hold them off." Ilara hesitated, unwilling to leave him to face the wolves alone. But she knew he was right. Their only hope was to retrieve the sunstone and use its power to drive back the guardians. She turned and ran, her heart pounding in her chest, the howls of the wolves echoing in her ears. She stumbled through the darkness, following the faint pull of the sunstone's power, a beacon in the oppressive darkness. The trees seemed to reach out to her, their branches like grasping claws, trying to pull her back. But she pressed on, driven by the urgency of their mission and the fear of losing Liam. Finally, through the trees, she saw it. The shrine, bathed in a soft golden light. It was a small, circular structure, built of ancient stones, its entrance framed by two towering pines. The air around the shrine hummed with energy, the power of the sunstone radiating outwards. She reached the entrance, her hand trembling as she pushed open the heavy stone door. Inside, the shrine was bathed in a warm, golden light. In the center of the room, resting on a pedestal, was the sunstone. It pulsed with a gentle light, its surface shimmering with an otherworldly energy. Alara reached out, her hand drawn to its power. As her fingers brushed against the smooth surface of the stone, a wave of energy surged through her, filling her with a sense of warmth and power. She grasped the stone, its weight surprisingly light, and closed her eyes, focusing on the energy flowing through her. She could feel the connection to the forest, to the spirits, to the very essence of the world around her. And she knew what she had to do. Taking a deep breath, Alara stepped out of the shrine the sunstone held aloft in her hand. The wolves were still there, surrounding Liam, their forms shimmering in the darkness. He was wounded, his clothes torn, his sword broken. But he was still fighting, his eyes burning with determination. Alara raised the sunstone, its light intensifying, bathing the forest in a golden glow. The wolves recoiled, their forms flickering and fading in the light of the stone. Their howls turned to whimpers, their menacing forms dissolving into wisps of smoke. The forest fell silent, the oppressive darkness lifting, replaced by the warm, comforting glow of the sunstone. Liam lowered his broken sword, his eyes wide with disbelief. Alara walked towards him, the sunstone still radiating its powerful light. The whispers in the pines had ceased, replaced by a sense of peace and tranquility. They had faced the guardians of the forest and emerged victorious. The sunstone was theirs, and with it, the hope of turning the tide of the war. The wind whispers through the pines above the tomb, a soft, mournful sigh that seems to carry the weight of centuries. It dances through the branches, a ghostly lullaby that echoes the secrets held within the cold stone walls. The moonlight, once a stark silver wash against the weathered stone, now fades, its brilliance swallowed by the encroaching dawn. The long, inky shadows, which had stretched and contorted like restless spirits throughout the night, now retreat, shrinking back into the corners of the forest, as if shy of the approaching light. You stand at the entrance to the tomb, the lantern light now a pale flicker against the rising sun. Its once vibrant glow has diminished, reduced to a mere whisper of illumination, almost insignificant against the burgeoning daylight. The scent of lavender and nightshade lingers in the air, a phantom reminder of the night's events. The sweet, calming fragrance of lavender, used to soothe the spirits of the fallen warriors, mingles with a darker, more potent aroma of nightshade, a silent testament to the protective rituals performed under the watchful moon. It's a bittersweet perfume, a lingering echo of the reverence and solemnity that permeated the night. The air hangs heavy with the memory of whispered prayers, the flicker of candlelight, and the weight of ancient oaths. The great stone doors of the tomb, once daunting and imposing, now seem almost welcoming, their stoic silence a comfort after the long night. You trace your fingers along the intricate carvings that adorn their surface, each groove and ridge a testament to the skill and devotion of those who built this sacred place. You can almost feel the echoes of their hands, the ghosts of their artistry, lingering in the cold stone. You ascend the stone steps, each footfall softer now, as if not wanting to disturb the sleeping warriors below. The rough stone feels cool beneath your boots, a stark contrast to the warmth that begins to radiate from the rising sun. With each upward step, the world above becomes more vibrant, more alive. The pre-dawn chill begins to dissipate, replaced by the gentle caress of the morning air. Bird song, faint at first, gradually increases in volume, a chorus of cheerful greetings to the new day. The rustle of leaves in the wind joins the symphony, a gentle reminder of the life that teems just beyond the tomb's silent embrace. But within the tomb, the silence remains unbroken. The air is still and heavy, laden with the weight of ages. The faint scent of incense clings to the walls, a ghostly reminder of countless ceremonies performed in honor of the fallen. You can almost hear the whispers of their names, carried on the gentle currents of air that circulate within the chamber. The moonlight, now completely extinguished, leaves behind a profound darkness within the tomb. The flickering lantern light reveals only glimpses of the chamber's grandeur, the towering columns carved with intricate designs, the sarcophagi lining the walls, each one a silent sentinel guarding the secrets within. You pause, taking a final moment to absorb the atmosphere, to pay your respects to the warriors who rest here, their deeds and sacrifices woven into the very fabric of the stone. You think of the moonlight pact, the solemn oaths exchanged beneath the watchful gaze of the moon. The memory brings a sense of peace, a quiet assurance that the warriors' legacy and the sacrifices they made will not be forgotten. The pact, forged in moonlight and sealed with whispered words, stands as a testament to the enduring power of honor and duty. You turn and descend the steps, leaving the silent world of the tomb behind. The world above greets you with the vibrant hues of dawn. The sky is a canvas painted with strokes of rose and gold, the clouds edged with fiery orange. The forest floor, once shrouded in darkness, now comes alive with color and movement. Dew-kissed leaves shimmer in the early morning light, and the air is filled with the sweet fragrance of pine and earth. And now, as the sun begins to paint the sky with hues of rose and gold, you find yourself drifting away, back to the warmth of your own bed. The images of the tomb, the scent of lavender and nightshade, the weight of the moonlight pact, all begin to fade, replaced by the familiar comforts of home. The echoes of the tomb's silence morph into the soft hum of a fan overhead, a gentle rhythmic drone that lulls you deeper into relaxation. The distant chirp of birds replaces the whispers of the wind through the pines, a cheerful reminder that the world outside is waking, vibrant and alive. The memory of the night's rituals, the solemn oaths, and the silent communion with the fallen warriors settles deep within your heart, a quiet strength that will sustain you through the trials to come. You close your eyes, surrendering to the gentle pull of sleep, knowing that the warriors rest peacefully, their spirits guarded by the moonlight pact. Rest easy, warrior, for tonight the battles are over, and the moonlight pact holds.